Hello, this is Chef John from foodwishes.com with Flatbread. That's right, not only is this really flat bread, it's also really flatbread. And what I mean by that is, unlike modern examples, this is nothing more than flour and water. Alright, so this is about as primitive a bread dough as you can get, and basically the ancient ancestor of any similar type products you see today. But anyway, enough of the history lesson. Let's go ahead and get started. So we're going to go ahead and spoon some flour down onto our work surface. And I'm going to use a combination of whole wheat, which is what this is right here. I kind of wanted to keep going with that ancient bread theme. So I'm going to do a combination of whole wheat, along with some regular unbleached all-purpose flour. And then for just a little bit of extra texture, I'm also going to put a little bit of cornmeal. And other than a pinch of salt, that's really it for the dry ingredients. So we'll give that a little quick mix. And then we're going to go ahead and make a well with our spoon right in the middle, which is going to hold the next and last ingredient, the water. So I'm going to pour in some water. And we're going to start mixing this stuff up right on the counter. Oh yeah, this recipe predates the invention of the stainless steel mixing bowl. So we'll take our spoon and we'll start slowly mixing in some flour. All I'm doing is going around kind of poking the peaks and slowly mixing in a little bit of that flour into the water. And at first you're going to get like a thin batter. And as you continue drawing more and more flour into the mixture, it's obviously going to thicken up. And I'm just going to keep working it with the spoon, pulling in a little more flour as I mix, until we get to the point where you're thinking to yourself, why am I still using this spoon? I should switch to my fingers. So at this point, let's switch from metal to flesh. So I'm going to give this kind of a little kneading with my fingers. And all we're looking to do is introduce enough flour so that we eventually get a very sticky, very soft dough that will just barely pull away cleanly from the surface. So you see how we're using kind of a circular motion there with the flat of our hand, just rolling it around like that, picking up a little extra flour if we need it, until eventually we have something that looks like this. So you can see it kind of wants to stick to my hands, it kind of wants to stick to the table, but it doesn't. And believe it or not, at that point your flatbread dough is done. Now in a perfect world, and by perfect world meaning you're not filming this, you'd wrap this up in plastic and let it sit on the countertop for an hour or two to kind of mature, and let that flour kind of fully absorb the liquid. But I'm not, I have things to do. So I'm going to go ahead and cut this in half and start rolling. And of course we're using the excess flour to flour the dough if we need. Flour the rolling pin, of course. And the other really nice thing about this technique is that you could just make one flatbread, or two flatbreads, or three. I mean, you could basically make this stuff to order. It's that quick. So just a very simple, very easy technique, which makes sense since they were doing it like thousands of years ago with no equipment. But anyway, we're going to roll that out to about 1/8 of an inch thick, using just enough flour so we can work with it. And speaking of rolling pin, you do not need an expensive rolling pin from the culinary store. For just a couple bucks at a hardware store, you can get a nice thick wooden dowel that will work just as well. And as I mentioned, this is a very sticky dough, and you can see right there it was sticking to my rolling pin. No problem, just add a little more flour. By the way, there's an old saying I just made up. Easy doughs make bad bread. All right, so in general, sticky, wet doughs that are hard to work with generally make really delicious breads. So don't be upset if it wants to stick to things. And if you're on a stone countertop or stainless steel like I am here, when you get down to near the final thickness, it's okay if it kind of sticks to the surface. That's actually going to help it keep stretched out, which is the situation I have right here. And of course, we always have our trusty bench scraper if we get in trouble. But as you can see, this actually should peel right off the surface, and we can give it a little extra stretch with our hands on the way to placing this into a very hot, preheated, dry cast iron skillet. So we'll place that in. That pan is very hot, by the way. Now, originally, this probably would have been stretched over a very smooth, very hot rock, but unfortunately, all my hot, smooth rocks were in the dishwasher. So I went with a cast iron pan, which works perfectly for this. And if you think making the dough is fast, the cooking of this is even quicker. So I like to give that first side about a minute. You'll notice that top surface changes appearance, kind of goes from something that's doughy to something that's kind of bready really quick. And you also should notice little bumps forming. Those are little bubbles that are expanding in the dough. And after about a minute, we'll flip that over. And you can see all those little scorch marks where those bubbles formed. And after we turn it, you'll see those kind of inflate a little bit. And to help that process along, I like to press it with the back of the spatula. Just kind of press it here and there. For whatever reason, that kind of helps the inflation process. So I'll give that side about a minute or so. We'll flip it back over. Again, I like to give it the old pressa. And once it looks like both sides are cooked, and we have those beautiful signature char marks on the blisters, we'll simply remove it from the pan, and that's it. Your flatbread's done. And by the way, if you use all white flour for this, it actually works a lot better. You will get a lighter textured flatbread that's a little softer, probably has more bubbles. But like I said, I was going for something a little more rustic. So I went ahead and I did my other piece of dough, and in just a few minutes, I had two warm, gorgeous pieces of homemade bread. It almost seems too good to be true, and yet it is. And then as far as how to serve it, obviously serving it warm is recommended, and since there's no fat at all in the dough, I do like to brush it with a little bit of butter or olive oil. I'm using olive oil in this case. And on this particular day, I had some pork shoulder I braised in a spicy tomato sauce. So that's what I'm going to be enjoying my flatbread with. A little bit of sauce, a little bit of basil, and that was just ridiculously delicious. And basically, as far as taste and texture, you're going to have something that's kind of in between a tortilla and a pita bread. All right, it's definitely not going to be as soft and airy as your modern flatbreads, especially if you use a whole wheat flour. But it is going to be very bread-like, which you're going to be able to see a little bit better here. Sans filling. Has a little bit of elasticity. A very pleasant chewiness. All right, that outside blistered surface gets a little bit crispy, while the inside retains a little bit of moistness. Just a beautiful thing. I mean, you walk into somebody's kitchen and do this in front of them, turning water and flour into flatbread in just a few minutes, they're going to look at you like you're some kind of superhero. And you know what? They're right. So I really do hope you give this a try. Head over to foodwishes.com for all the ingredient amounts and more info as usual. And as always, enjoy.